Welcome to Democracy Talk, the short interview series for the forthcoming Virtual Global Roundtable organised by the International Association of Constitutional Law on Democracy 2020, Assessing Constitutional Decay, Breakdown and Renewal Worldwide. It's happening on the 18th to the 26th of November, 9 webinars across 5 days. Now, I was delighted to sit down on the 3rd of November with Jorge Contesse, who's going to be speaking in webinar 3 on the 19th of November. Jorge is going to be talking about the constitutional referendum just held in October in Chile, and his paper is entitled A COVID-19 Constitution, Democratic Erosion, Public Trust and Constitutional Creation in Chile. Jorge is an associate professor at Rutgers Law School in the USA. Jorge, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Tom.
So Jorge, you're going to be speaking about something that everybody wants to know about. It's the constitutional referendum that happened very recently and that was passed by a landslide, 78%. So for a global audience, why is Chile replacing its 1980 constitution?
In my view, there are two sets of reasons, Tom. The first set of reasons, I would say, are symbolic. And by this, I don't mean to say by any currency that these are not important reasons. Some people would say, oh, it's just a symbolic reason. And I think when it comes to constitution making and constitutionalism, symbols matter quite a lot. The symbol here is that the 1980 Constitution is the Pinochet Constitution. It was enacted during a dictatorship. It was enacted when there were no fundamental rights. People were being persecuted. And so it was against that backdrop that this Constitution was enacted. So that's one, what I think is a very important and powerful reason. And the second set of reasons are really what the legacy of that Constitution has been. Pinochet was smart enough to know that at some point he would be out of office. And the most important thing for them was to make sure that their legacy would remain intact. And the 1980 constitutional regime, that constitutional machinery, if you will, does exactly that. They were very smart in setting up a system that would somehow extend Pinochet's legacy well beyond his stepping down of office and his death even.
Really interesting. And in our webinar, you're going to be discussing the role of the Constitutional Court as a key actor in the referendum process. So what has the court's role actually been in the process?
I would say the court has become sort of a proxy of the need for a constitutional change. It's really been this one actor that people have come to understand that is on their way, for constitutional changes in general. The court has become a very active player, which is something that, as you know very well, can happen. But the problem here is that it has become an active political actor basically to prevent changes from happening. And so each time that there's been a serious effort to bring about change, for example, in issues such as education, a couple of years ago with abortion, reproductive rights, some of the areas where people have strong feelings, strong constitutional feelings, and there's this court that says, no, this is unconstitutional. So I would say the people have come to realize we have a problem with both the court, which has become an obstacle, but that court is saying, it's not us, it's really the Constitution that prevents, Congress or the president to move forward along these lines. So that has been really sort of the wake-up call for the people in Chile to say we have a constitutional problem as represented in, of course, the Constitutional Court.
And it can't really be fixed in any other way than with the new constitution if you're going to be faithful to the law.
Well, if that's what we've been hearing, right, that there's a problem with the Constitution, people are saying, okay, then let's change it.
So this is this constituent process. You've described it as a distinctive case of democratic renewal. So what is really distinctive about it?
Well, I like to think about this along the lines of your own project, Democratic Decay, right? The notion that democracy is in decay in many places around the world. And here I'm trying to kind of tweak a little bit and offer and think with those of us who are going to be attending the webinars, the fact that there's this very powerful and palpable constituent energy that has been going on for a number of years. This is not from last year. This has been going on for a number of years in Chile. And the fact that the system implodes in the sense that we see all this mass protest, even with instances of violence in many cases, and yet the system finds a way to kind of give a channel, an outlet, to this constituent energy. And so what I'm offering here as a way of, to think about a sort of non-extra institutional ways of changing. The last time we changed our constitution was first with a coup, with the Air Force literally bombing the presidential palace, and then with the enactment of the 1980 constitution during a dictatorship, right, where people were being persecuted and human rights were massively violated. So the fact that this is happening within the constraints of existing institutions and the offer of now a new institution, which is going to be this Constituent Assembly, is to me an interesting example of a sort of a case study to think about democratic renewal, right? There's decay that's democratic as well, but that it finds a way out by kind of, resorting to those very institutions that seem to be crumbling.
It's a really interesting instance of, we've been talking about globally, is the solution to democracy's problems more democracy? And certainly Chile seems to have answered that, yes, it is.
Yep.
Yes. So I'm really interested, this vote is the result of months of mass protests. And, the political branches didn't just act on their own, but in response to these long-standing protests, calling for meaningful change. And do you think this process can deliver that meaningful change?
This is an area that goes beyond my competence, because I feel like I would be speculating about what's going to happen, and I really don't know. No one really knows. But what we do know is that there was this, as I said before, a sort of constituent energy that needed, an outlet. And you're right. For a year now, we've witnessed this massive protest. In many cases, the symbol in Chile has been, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of clashes with, between protesters and the police. And this was just a routine, like a weekly thing every Friday evening in downtown Santiago. And interestingly enough, both during the day of the constitutional referendum, but also the following Friday, we did not see any of these major instances of clashes. It seems to me that somehow the constitutional referendum has given an opportunity for a return of civility. We were told, pundits, polls, that the country was highly polarized. And with a 78-22% vote, it's hard to square the notion that this is a highly polarized country, when it's really some areas, really the wealthy areas of Santiago, where the economic, political, intellectual elite live, and the rest of the country. So the notion that there's no such polarization, the challenge for that elite to kind of understand what's happening, why is it that we are so disconnected from 80% of the population, should, I think, I hope, I expect, kind of to allow this process to move in a direction in which it will ease up those tensions.
Thank you. And one last question out of my own curiosity. So Jorge, the Constitutional Court itself, it has these unusually large powers, partly because it was installed by the Pinochet dictatorship itself to sort of be a mechanism for protecting its own privileges into the potential democratic era. So can you tell us just very quickly a little bit about that, and whether the court's role you think will change under a new constitution?
You're absolutely right, Tom. The court was set up in a way that would be a sort of the guardian of the 1980 Constitution's legacy, which is, in other words, the Pinochet regime's legacy. So you have this very powerful court, which in 2005 was given the powers that were until then vested on the Supreme Court, right? Which is a different body, of course. Now the Constitutional Court, starting in 2005, concentrated all sort of judicial review powers, both in abstract and sort of ex post review. So that's a key component of this equation. But also, and particularly in the last, I would say, 3 years, 5 years maybe, the court became a sort of an unleashed court, willing to step out of its, zone, its competences, understanding that basically we are the Constitution. Now, that Constitution, the 1980 project, right? And so you have a court that has tremendous powers, a contingent court, meaning the members who think of themselves as sort of the ultimate interpreter. There's nothing above us. And so we have to guard the Constitution, and the Constitution that we are tasked to guard is that Constitution. And so just think about all of this constituent energy kind of, brewing on the one hand, confronting and facing this very rigid wall that has, that the Constitutional Court became. It was bound to happen that there would be a clash, and that clash was happening for a number of years, and suddenly, and I would say kind of abruptly, they just collided. And now the ways in which we have sort of moved forward is, fortunately, through a constituent process instead of just having people on the streets protesting.
A genuinely democratic process that hopefully will bring a more democratic era. So Jorge, thank you so much for speaking with us. Really looking forward to the discussion in webinar 3 on the 19th of November. And for now, just a very sincere thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Looking forward as well.